It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obuchi, and thanks a lot for joining us. Yes, politics is still very heavy in the air, even though the World Cup is going on without Nigeria, yes. I don't know if I have gotten over that heartbreak, but considering how great the games are, have been, and of course Africa still has a representative there. A lot of people are feeling pretty good about it, but would like to feel even better about our politics and about our country. February 2023 is fast approaching. There's a lot of campaigning and politicking going on. The past week has been as heavy as any, and we're going to be talking about a lot of politics on the show today. But before that, we're going to be zeroing in on something that's very special to me, a movement that has morphed into so many things and has become a force in this country, the Enough is Enough Nigeria organization. We're going to be talking about that here today with a special guest of mine, the Executive Director of Enough is Enough Nigeria, Yemi Adamolekun. Thanks for being here today. So, a lot of people are familiar with the EIE story and what it has been doing, but I mean, 2022 is how many years later? 12 years later. This all started in 2010 through a protest. And I want to talk about that now because we've seen protests over time since then. We've seen, you know, the Occupy Nigeria. We saw what happened in 2020, which many have said has been quite a defining moment for a lot of people, especially mentally, yes. As with regards to how to deal with Nigeria, you know. But really, did that move any needle, you know, with conversations in this country? There are people who are worried about the fact that not a lot was achieved since then. The things we protested against in 2020 are still there, or sometimes even worse. You know, nothing really has changed, or has it?
I think quite a bit has. I can understand why people think not a lot has. But if you just take level of awareness, period, I think there are a lot more people talking. There are a lot more people engaging. A lot more young people are running for office. I mean, the Not Too Young to Run kind of movement came after that. So lower the age for young people to participate. And I think people are also using social media very differently to engage. I remember, 2011, after the 2011 elections, TV is unidirectional. So you talk, you can be shouting all you want in your house. Nobody's listening to you. Radio, unless it's a call-in program, also unidirectional. But social media is bidirectional. So Twitter, Facebook, the tools that were used to organize the 2010 Enough is Enough protest. Come 2011, after elections, politicians, okay, this is where young people are, yeah, let's go. But they were shocked. So you say something and someone responds to you immediately is a lie. You are lying. And because social media doesn't have the niceties of Your Excellency, excuse me, sir, they just tell you, it's a lie. You are lying. There's no courtesy. So, I mean, that led to sort of the phrases of children of anger. So I think social media has also evolved because 2011, the shock, politicians retreated, and then you now have SA New Media. President Buhari alone has probably 5 people doing new media for Hausa, General, all sorts of forms. So again, I joke about it that we created employment and young people are now engaged. And then this season, we've seen new technology. So you have TikTok, for example. Now, TikTok is even worse. There's no space for excellency, nothing. They're making fun of you as they engage. So I would say engagement has increased. I would say young people are more, also understand governance more. So, I mean, this year we saw everybody's now paying attention to delegates. When you're collecting USD.
In a dollar scarcity.
There you go. So now people are a lot more like, okay, I need to join a party. Where should I go? So I think in those kind of markers, there's certainly things, we've moved the needle. Participation in elections. Everybody is, not everybody, people are talking about it a lot more. Are you voting? Are you going out to vote? Who are you voting for? Da, da, da. So in those things, yes. But do we still have fuel scarcity? Yes, we still do. Are schools still rubbish? Yes, they still are. But it's part of the journey. So things were bad. More people are now trying to get involved. And the hope is that the people that now get involved can now begin to turn that.
I want to talk about, you know, how protests have evolved. You know, those of us who are old enough, without giving away our ages too much, lived through the military in some way. We saw especially the mid to late 90s, where it was a recurring theme. There was a protest almost every day, you know, against the military at the time. And it was almost a part of our culture to see that happen. Then, of course, democracy came, things tapered down a bit. Then we saw what happened in 2010 and then in 2012, and then what we're seeing now. You know, how do you think the culture of protests have evolved In that time, and sorry, we're joined now by Chude Jidon, who's the host of With Chude, and also a huge part of why EIE exists today. Thanks a lot for being here today. But back to the question, Yemi, let's just quickly get with that.
Well, protest could evolve based on what you are protesting, one, tools available, and tools available also influences communication. We joke about the fact that the Enough is Enough protest, to stream it, we needed a generator, because then you didn't have MiFis or internet-enabled devices in that, or access to internet in that sense. So, but now, I mean, fast forward 10 years to NSAS, we're talking live. Actually, that's actually a very good one. So we needed a generator to do 2010, but NSAS had Instagram Live, and that's how people were able to watch what happened. So it's evolved in terms of tools, it's evolved in terms of what people are protesting about. But what has also evolved is that there's also protest weariness, so to speak. So in the military era, it was very driven by labor unions. So either Pengusan or NLC, and some citizens in different kind of configurations, but mostly organized groups, Campaign for Democracy, CLO, they were the arrowheads of protest. By the time it came to ours, as you said, Chude wrote an email, got a bunch of young people, professionals, to show up in Abuja to protest. And then fast forward to 2020, ELA is calling for protest on Twitter. File says I will join. Ron Town says, where is it happening? Naira Marley says I'm upset. Renu gets angry, shows up at Ikeja. So the dynamic also changes. And with that also then comes what happens next.
Yeah.
With organized groups, it's easy to follow because there is a group existing.
Yeah.
But when it's just individual citizens expressing their anger,
So I
it's a
guess
bit
that's
harder.
where sort of the snag is. Let me come to you now with that, because we're talking about how effective protests are. You found that in the 90s when it was the military, it was almost like sustaining it was more important, you know. You had a protest almost every week, you know, with the Risagbanko Bars and the Falanas and the, you know, Fawahimis, who were just constantly in the face of government. And it's sort of a critique we've gotten these days where they say, you guys just did this one thing. Yes, it might have been impactful, but everybody got tired when it looked like there was no result from that one. Is that still the way to protest? In a climb like this, you know, where even protesting, under a democracy, you would expect shouldn't be a big deal, is a big deal. How do you keep that going?
Right.
If at all.
So it's been long since I've answered
It's more about joy right now.
I know.
So I was just thinking, I think that, funny enough, without revealing too much, I'm actually working on a film that tries to explain this exact question. So that's the weird thing, you know. And we're going as far back as 1993, June 12th, to say that the resonance of the Tinubu candidacy, for instance, is owed by a large part by his participation in the sustained protest movements from 1993. The credibility that Sowore has as a candidate comes from his student union activism. In fact, he has never stopped being a student union activist. You know? That's the energy, you know. And the third force movement that we finally do have, I mean, the elections will say whether that is a thing or not, came from the NSAS protest. It's not as if this movement didn't exist before, but the NSAS protest crystallized it. And so on the one hand, it's always very funny to me, as the same way that there was almost a direct line from Occupy Nigeria to 2015. It's always funny to me in a democracy when people say protests don't work. Yeah. But I also understand how the real problem is this, and this is my gospel, you know, is that we take democracy for granted. So people don't want to come and protest because, you know, while we complain that there is no democracy, the urgency to protest isn't there because there is a democracy, because there are freedoms, because nobody's going to arrest you directly like that. You know, they will disappear you, push you here, begin to issue press releases, like, oh, you are not narcotic, it was an arrest, it was not an invitation, you know, all those kinds of dance around. But democracy blunts that brute force that makes people say, no, this is not acceptable, you know. So on the one hand, I think there are two questions in one. On the one hand, it is a falsity, that and in a democracy, the ruling party has an incentive to tell you that protest doesn't work. You know, they have an incentive to ridicule you, to reduce it, to delegitimize it. That's almost their job, because if you're in the ruling party by default, you believe that we're in the right direction. You know, it's the job of the people who understand, and maybe the job of people who understand, to explain to others who don't yet understand, that you still need to keep showing up. Because like storytelling, what protests do is they don't lead to immediate outcome. It's not a business, not the capital market, where something leads to this outcome. Those series of events come together and create value at a time and date that you cannot predict, but it's almost an exact science.
Okay, now that you mentioned that, now you sent this email in February 2010, I believe, to a group of people. It ended up being a protest in Abuja, I think 1 or 2 protests at the time that has now become enough is enough for 12 years now. At the time, I don't know what the picture you saw down the line was, but is that something that's important when you're trying to achieve a goal like this? You know, with 2020, for example, where people said, what is this thing you people are really doing? What is the end goal? Is that always important? Because most times protests are spontaneous. You don't always have a plan. Did you see this happening? And are you glad that this has happened? Should people always have a plan like this?
So those of us those of us who have been part of generational change movements have an unspoken pact to say nothing that might even be remotely critical of 2020.
Amen.
because you know, there's something where they say, don't bring your family matter outside, because there are too many people who are waiting to mock that movement, as if something is not better than nothing, you know? And so to that extent, I'm very unwilling in public to say anything that might seem like, oh, this movement didn't become what it could be, etc. I think that is an answer on itself. The other answer is that, yes, it is institutionalization is crucial. It is crucial. You see, first and foremost, NGOs in Nigeria don't get a lot of credit. The Nigerian government moves on environmental sustainability. You can almost draw a line from the madness of Esther Agbarakwe and just this branch of people who are like, Esther, what are you talking about? Why is your email Esther Climate? When Esther talking about Esther Climate, 10 years ago, I didn't know what that meant, you know. Gender-based violence in Nigeria and the legislation across states was because of the movements of people from Dorothy Njemanze and all of that, just changing the cultural climate and the legislative climate for what is accepted, what is possible. And so, to that extent, if those people didn't have institutions, there could be no sustainability. And we do live in a time when, and Yemi said this to me in an interview lately, that we are very individualistic. We need to find a way to create institutions out of this individualistic trend. Else, it will not lead to anything as great as it could be.
So it's a long game, basically, Yemi, and you have carried this thing on your head. We all know you have done an amazing job.
She has carried it on her head.
She literally has, you know. It's been 12 years, and being a part of this organization, let me just put it that way, without saying I carry it on your head, couldn't have been easy. I mean, we've seen organizations abroad. We see what happens with Black Lives Matter and all the controversies that have come with it, even, you know, in so short a time. There's all of these conversations about money and all of that, you know. When you're in an organization like this where it's literally in the public's interest and everybody seems to have a stake in it, how has the journey been in 12 years? And are you satisfied with where you are? Did you think you would have achieved more? Because Nigeria is tough, really, when you're tackling government and government issues.
Honestly, I think probably one of the challenges was the fact that it started the way it did. I say that EIE didn't have a plan. Protest? Okay, we can't protest every time we're upset. What do we do? Take advantage of 2011 elections, get young people mobilized. And then that became the organization. But it wasn't that there was a strategic plan. We didn't have a 5-10-year plan. By 2015, I landed on Obi Ezekwesili at an event, spoke about the concept of the Office of the Citizen. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. If what we're trying to do is get citizens engaged so they know their rights and responsibilities, what we're doing can fit into that. Did some research, the concept had been around for a while, and we tried to then run with it. But I think, honestly, the fact that it wasn't a clear strategic plan was a minus. But the positive of it really was the fact that, quite honestly, I've been gifted with good young people who, yes, I've carried it on my head, but who have also sacrificed significantly to make EIE run. And I say that some of the milestones we've also seen is also exciting. As of today, nobody has corrected me. EIE, I believe, has hosted or co-hosted the most number of debates of different formats of any organization in Nigeria. you were part of the moderated the very first one, the What About Us debate. I was at an event that Chimamanda spoke at yesterday, and I reminded her that she moderated that event. And she was like, oh yeah, that's true. This was 2011. So from that then to now, that's one thing. Yes, there's this whole conversation about debates, who's running away now, who's not running away. But debates are critical to a democracy.
Yes.
And EIE, following that path, I think is quite significant. Secondly, National Assembly. We've done a lot of work in terms of accountability at the National Assembly, and just the fact that we've gotten to the point where it's now clear that even though the National Assembly has the electric gadgets to enable us to know how different people vote, they're deliberately not using it because they don't want us to hold them accountable. And the advocacy of that needs to continue, but the milestone of understanding that was a huge thing. So it has been challenging, and I'll end with this point. When I started EIE, when I started leading EIE, because of where I was coming from, I was clear that EIE's audience would be Nigeria's educated elite. So yes, there's a message to those on the lower end of the socioeconomic strata. But my sense was that if we get the educated elite to understand that they have the most to lose, that in their own enlightened self-interest, we'll get a bit more traction. Okay. We're the ones that worry about the schools we send our kids to. I can't send my children to any of the schools that I went to. And I'm sure that's the same for both of us. So because we have the most to lose, let's focus on getting us to understand what is at stake and then take action. We haven't been as successful in getting that shift in how people engage. And I think in probably the next 10 years, for EIE, that's something to really look at.
Okay, great stuff. Now let's talk about this book and this event that's coming up. Why is it important, especially now? I mean, election is hot in the air. Was that a factor in doing this at this time?
Not at all. It was meant to be, the coincidence is nice though. It was meant to be to celebrate our 10th anniversary in 2020. But COVID happened and the book didn't see the light of day. Sure. Yeah. And the book didn't see the light of day. Then, yeah, last year was kind of a blur. But earlier this year, I just thought, you know what, we're going into another election year. A lot of the stuff in the book will become kind of stale if we don't push it out. And NSAS was also a good trigger. Because I was telling you today, at the beginning of the year in 2020, I was like, it's 10-year anniversary. We should really have a protest. To your point, a lot of things are still wrong. So, hey, let's ginger everybody else. But we were clear as a group that unless there was a trigger, the normal civil society people will come out. But it won't really galvanize the country in a way that it should. So when NSAS happened, we're like, hey, we got our protest. But anyway, the idea was 10 chapters, a chapter for each year, and then looking at the different areas of EIE's work. So elections, National Assembly, social media, ban, and things of that nature. So when it became 12 years this year, we decided to add 2 more chapters. I then wrote an introduction. And Chude graciously agreed to write a postscript reflecting on NSAS and the lessons from there. So that's the 12th chapter. So it's now quite auspicious, and I really like it. So in our 12th year, we have a book in 12 chapters, and it's going to be launched tomorrow, 12th of the 12th month.
It wasn't planned at all.
It wasn't actually, it really wasn't. It just kind of, the pieces, especially the day, the pieces just kind of came together.
Okay, Chude, I think we're almost out of time, but very quickly, what should people expect tomorrow and from the book? And, you know, like she said, elections are here. Any lessons to draw from this?
I think that when it comes to youth involvement in democracy over the past, since we returned in 2099, EIE has the most institutional knowledge of any other civil society actor in the country. And we are lucky that this institution that has institutional knowledge has it documented. Yes. That is also rare. You know, it's rare that 12 years after you can gather many of the board members of the organization who have different commercial and societal incentives now to say, we still believe in it. I think that anybody who really cares about how young people continue to engage in this country should either be there, support it, or pay attention to what comes out of tomorrow's event.
Okay, where's this happening? Sorry.
It's at the Muson Center. It's tomorrow at 6 p.m. I think people are registering on
footprints.eie.ng.
Yeah. Footprints.eie.ng. And where can we get this?
It will be on our website, eie.ng, for now, before it enters bookstores.
It is very, I mean, there's multiple contributors, and these are people that are voices,
Yes.
people listening to. So I think it's very important that we pay attention to this. Thank you very much, Chude and Yemi, for being here today. EIE is doing amazing things and continues to do so.
Thank you.
And please continue to carry it on your head. We are very grateful.